I will call this meeting to order. I'll entertain a motion to convene as the South Ogden City Planning Commission.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. We are in our meeting. We have a couple of items on the agenda tonight. Two of them require a public hearing. We're going to do those public hearings separately. So just for the public's awareness, a public hearing is a time for you to comment. So if you would like to make a comment when we open the hearing, please come forward to the microphone, state your name and whether you're a resident of South Ogden or not, and then make your comment. A public hearing is not really a question and answer period between the public and the commission, or a time for argument. It's a time for us to hear your comments. So that's the goal. That being said, we have four smart people and me up here, and so if a comment has been made, we probably don't need to hear it multiple times. Just keep that in mind, so we don't have to spend a lot of time hearing the same thing. And we obviously expect civility in our comments, expect that some will disagree, and that's okay. We want to hear both sides, or whatever that you have to say, but we have to keep it civil. So, that being said, I will entertain a motion to move into a public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, I should say to move into the public hearing to consider comments on whether chickens and or fowl should be allowed in South Ogden City. Does your motion still stand?
Yes, so moved. Still moved.
Okay, in the second. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We are now in a public hearing. We invite you as the members of the public to come forward, make your comments. We're happy to have you here.
Hi, my name is Blaine Whitney. I live right here on Chimes View, and I want to have chickens. So, boy, this is a tough crowd then, huh? I got the flyer that has this article from Mike Howard on here. It starts with the charming and peaceful community of South Ogden, Utah, faces a pivotal decision that could reshape the landscape and lifestyle should the city be allowed the keeping of chickens and other blah blah blah. First I'd like to say it seems like a lot of the charm and everything has gone out with the advent of all the new condos that have sprung up all over the place. I don't think a few backyard chickens is going to have near the severe impact that he's kind of suggesting in this article. He does mention the pros. Mentions potentially reducing carbon footprints, and it doesn't seem like that was much of a concern by increasing the population here. He goes on later to say in here that the things that a code enforcement officer goes through, they only have one for the city who has divided responsibilities, I understand, according to the article. But it said, the complaints can be about illegally parked vehicles, private businesses being run out of homes, too many dogs, feral cat population, raccoons, neighborhood noise complaints, weeds, and unsightly yards. And I understand. And perhaps we need to look at the increase in revenue from all these new people that we get here. To afford a new code enforcement officer. I think with all the buildings and things that are springing up, that should be a concern just by itself, is just code enforcement and branch that guy's ability out to do things. You mentioned in here earlier in a previous discussion about not having roosters in the backyard, and I believe that's a part of an ordinance in North Ogden, and I completely agree with that. Nobody wants to be waking up by roosters or guinea fowl or peacocks at, 0 dark 30 in the morning. I spend enough of my time in the Marine Corps waking up early to that stuff, so I don't need that anymore. But something reasonable, seems a happy medium where, just a few birds or a minimum. I know there's a place over on like 26th and Jefferson around the holidays. They've got 25 turkeys walking around in a small little patch of land. They're walking around the street, and it's I understand it's tough to enforce everything that needs to be done, but I think a happy medium could be made. I'd like to have a couple birds. I think it'd be okay. I won't hurt anybody. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As kids, I forgot it.
Here comes your mom to help.
My name is Zion Rock, and I'm a resident of South Ogden. Having backyard chickens will enrich my life. Giving me responsibility to care for something other than myself that also gives back to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Kirsten Stewart, and I live off 950 here in South Ogden. And let me start by saying I get my eggs fresh, I get my beef fresh, I get my pork fresh, but I don't think chickens belong in the city. People have used the reasoning of it will be cheaper, and so I kind of did a little research. And right now, if you go to the store, 60 eggs is $12. So for $50, you're going to have 240 eggs. But to start a chicken coop, give or take with the chicks, if you go like 5 to 10 chickens, the lamp, the bulb, the container, the food, the bedding, that's $100-ish. And depending on the coop, some people are very creative and probably can do it for next to nothing. And some people will probably want to give their chickens a castle. So it can be anywhere from $100 to Lord knows how much money. Then on top of that, city chickens are not like free-range chickens. You're going to need to get scratch feed and all of the extra stuff that they're going to need because they can't run free. Also, you do have to take a chicken to the vet if it gets sick. That's another $100. So looking at that, is it really cheaper for like a family of 4? No. Is it cheaper maybe for a family of 6, 8, or 10? Very possibly, depending on what they do. The sicknesses it brings: Marek's disease, fowl pox, respiratory infections, I can't say it, I'm sorry, aspergillosis, ringworm, lice, and mites. They also can carry Salmonella or Campylobacter, and when they drop their feces, and if dogs get into it, they can get the Campylobacter. According to a study of usu.edu, there's an increase in rat populations due to city chickens. Like I said, I'm not against chickens. I just don't think they belong in the city. As someone who rescues dogs and animals as it is now, I thought people can't, and I will not say all people because I know some people who treat their dogs very well, but people don't even take care of the pets that they have now. An example of that is when this came up, I walked my dog in different neighborhoods on purpose, and in 1 week, 37 dogs either came at us, were off leash, or free roaming. In 1 week. In maybe a 3-mile stretch of South Ogden. So if people can't take care of an animal that you can train, how do they expect to take care of an animal you cannot? that can carry diseases that can get these other animals sick. If people aren't, how many dogs are in Utah, or in South Ogden, and how many are licensed? So if somebody can't follow a simple rule as licensing their dogs, are they going to follow your rules that you set forth with having chickens in the city? I just want to know that when I go out in my yard or my backyard, I'm safe, my dog's safe, nobody's going to get sick, my dog's not going to attack a chicken that comes flying into my backyard. I think there's a lot of cons that need to be considered. Like again, and I'll end with, I love my fresh eggs, I love my fresh beef, and I love my fresh pork, but I don't think it belongs in a city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. My name is Brian Smith, and I live in South Ogden. To start, I'd like to read this flyer from World War I about chicken keeping. Uncle Sam expects you to keep hens and raise chickens. 2 hens in the backyard for each person in the house will keep a family fresh eggs. Even the smallest backyard has room for a flock large enough to supply the house with eggs. The cost of maintaining such a flock is small. Table and kitchen waste provide much of the feed for the hens. They require little attention, only a few minutes today. An interested child, old enough to take a little responsibility, can care for a few fowls as well as a grown person. Every backyard in the United States should contribute its share to a bumper crop of poultry and eggs in 1918. Chicken keeping and bird keeping has been a huge part of this country for its history. Around World War II, after the Victory Gardens, amazingly, people were incentivized to grow these gardens in their backyards. We became suburbanized and urbanized, and we lost this habit that humans have been doing for thousands of years. I also wanted to mention, a lot of people bring up, keeping chickens and having eggs from your own yard chickens is more expensive than buying them from the store. I'd like to argue that is not true. If you're buying 64 eggs at a time, you're buying eggs that come from a chicken kept in a cage the size of a shoebox, pumped full of hormones and antibiotics. If you want to get healthier eggs, you can move towards the more expensive range and get cage-free eggs. From a friend that worked at a chicken farm, that's hardly any better. The requirements is something like 1 chicken per square foot of space. So they could just keep a pen, 5-foot pen, 5 chickens in it. It's not, it's still not ethical. And then when you get to pasture-raised eggs, you're looking at about $6 a dozen. And at that point, it definitely becomes economically reasonable to keep your own chickens. Regardless of that point, however, it is not my business or anyone else's business how I or they spend their money. If I choose to build, the chicken Taj Mahal, the duck Taj Mahal, that's me. That's out of my pocket. A lot of people also like to argue that chickens are dirty and noisy. I would like to point out everybody's favorite animal. I've got one, so I'm not judging. A dog. A chicken does not produce nearly as much poop as a dog. It does not make nearly as much noise as a dog, excluding roosters, which has been brought up already. And a chicken's not going to attack you. We have these large, dangerous animals that roam our city that, that we all accept, except somehow we've forgotten this thing that we've also been keeping for thousands of years. I love my dog, but I'd also love some chickens.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having us. My name's Christy Spencer. I live in South Ogden over by Glassman. And I would like to voice my support for the chickens in the backyard. And I'd like to just give you a little bit of food for thought. My number one reason for wanting chickens in the backyard is my 3 daughters. The opportunity for them is vast. First off, nutritionally, as was mentioned, the eggs that come out of a backyard chicken, if you crack it and compare it to one in the store, they don't even look like the same thing. And you can see and taste the difference. So that's important to me. But I have a daughter with severe asthma. We can't have dogs, we can't have cats. But being able to engage and learn about animal husbandry and take it to the county fair and be part of the 4-H program and learn responsibility, cleaning the coop, making sure that they're doing exactly what they should, learning that responsibility, I think is really valuable. And also it builds a sense of community with other people in the community who have, I mean, just like I live by Glassman and everybody walks their dogs at the same time. They all know each other. People who do beekeeping, it builds a sense of community. And right now, I think South Ogden could really benefit from additional camaraderie and community. It's also incredibly sustainable. And one thing that I had talked to one of the ladies who used to be on the city council, and she said her reason for not supporting it was rats. And I mentioned to her that environmentally, chickens are quite sound. They reduce the pests and the insects, which means you're not going to have to use quite as much pesticide. And if we're talking about bringing in rodents or anything like that, then we also need to ban bird feeders, and regulate how dog food and cat food are kept and all of these other things. So to me, that point doesn't resonate. The mental health aspect is surprising. There's been numerous researchers that have talked about when people interact with birds, it alleviates depression. If you do a quick Google search, you'll find some really interesting things. And my husband, who grew up in Morgan, whenever we go out there and we spend a lot of time with the chickens, there's something that happens that elevates the mood, and there's science to back that up if you're curious. I definitely understand the need for regulations, limits of how many, not having noisy roosters, things like that. I think that there's just appropriate ways that we could do this, that we could be responsible, that we can build our community and build our kids in the process. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Georgia Spencer. I'm a resident of South Ogden, and I'd like to say chickens. I think we should have chickens because I think they're really cute. They wouldn't really be a problem because lots of bugs sometimes get around. And there was a chicken at my grandpa's house. He has a farm up in Morgan, and I saw a chicken. There was just this big bug on the ground, and it just picked it up. And I think that would really help because I know we have some flowers here in South Ogden, and I think that might help it because I don't really know if you guys like flowers, but I think most people like flowers because they're beautiful, they smell good, they make people feel happy. I think that if we had chickens some places, then they'd kind of pick up all the bugs and they'd feel, well, the flowers would start growing a little more, and I think we'd need that because I think I'd like to make South Ogden a more beautiful place with lots of flowers, and I think chickens would be a great part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia.
Hello, thank you for having us. Rick and Mindy Bingham, we are residents. A few things have been mentioned already, but we actually have a chicken experience. They don't have them now, but a few years ago, our neighbors got chickens. They built an ugly chicken coop. I had to plant a tree to hide it. It did stink. There was smell like a swamp or a barnyard. They used our fence as one wall of their chicken coop. So it was right next to our property, right next to our kids' play area. Like I say, it stunk. They did make noise. We did get rats and mice. We had rats that would run through our kids' play area. I found a rat nest under our central air unit right next to our house. There was one on the side of our carport, and there was a rat's nest in our carport. I killed 3. I know our neighbor's dog killed maybe 3 or 4 also. Killed a lot of mice. We have rats droppings in all of our sheds. So it was hard to get rid of them. And even now they don't have the birds, we still have rats, mice, and the ugly chicken coop is still there. But a raccoon will go through your yard at night, but the rats and mice, I'm sure they tried to get into our house. They stay, they're still there. So we just think, as far as chickens go, probably more for farm country, not for South Ogden. We're more of an urban city now. So we're against the chickens. Like I say, it really stunk. If you have chickens, it kind of flows into your neighbor's property, either the smell, the noise, or the rats and the mice. So we were just really glad when they got rid of their birds. Like I say, I've still got the tree trying to cover their ugly chicken coop, but yeah, so we're against it. Do you want to say anything?
No, other than just that we're against it, and our concern mainly is what he's already mentioned, but also the inability or the lack of code enforcers if they were allowed. Just,
Yeah.
it's not something that's easily regulated, and it would be, it could more easily become out of hand than it would be something that would be more maintained.
Yeah, at the time our kids were really young, to see rats running through their play area, just not a good feeling. And like I say, we had to set up traps. We have a dog, we have kids. I hate to set up poison or snap traps or that. We had to be really careful. I'm sure I didn't catch them all, but yeah, I think, last winter, yeah, we had tracks, and I caught one last winter too. But yeah, our experience was bad. It was just messy, smelly, and
Do
like
you
I
know how
say,
many chickens they had?
At
They-
least a dozen.
well,
or-
they had chickens, ducks, and like game hens, and the most I counted at one time was like 20. They had a lot. It was like out of control, so.
And we did call the city on them, and they were visited a few times, but they would never answer the door. They would
Yeah,
be quiet.
yeah, so they did have quite a few, but yeah, like I say, it was pretty bad, so. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matt Goodson. I'm a resident of South Ogden for about 7 years, and my wife all her life. I just saw the email about this the other night, and I've been busy on other projects, so I just wrote a few notes while I've been sitting here. So I'll try not to repeat what's been said, but appreciate you giving us the opportunity to discuss this. So one thing I wanted to mention is there's been problems and benefits mentioned, but problems, in my experience, problems are not animal problems. Problems are people problems. So, and I think government should try to stay as small as possible and do as little about regulating as possible. Let the people have as much freedom and independence as possible, but regulate what needs to be regulated. And when you regulate, try to focus on the actual problem. So when I moved into here, I had chickens for many years. I grew up on a farm. My grandmother, grandpa, my house was in the middle of my grandpa's farm, and the elementary schools came over for field trips. So my best friend when I was 2 years old was a duck. So I've had chickens and things a lot. And I brought a chicken coop with me when I came to South Ogden. I didn't realize the ordinance, I didn't check, but I had a few chickens. I had 4 chickens, and then animal control came, and they wrote me a ticket, and I came here and appeared on that ticket. My ticket was different than what the judge had on his ticket. He said, "I've never seen this before. Here's a violation of code 7 whatever." And I said, "That's not what my ticket says. My ticket says, where it says violation, it says guilty or charged with some violating chickens." And I said, "Your Honor, I have never in my life violated a chicken." And he dismissed the ticket. But So problems tend to be people problems. And when they talk about smell and noise and feces and rats and raccoons, in my case, I've had neighbors that had dogs, and I couldn't step out in my backyard because of the smell of the feces of their dog just all over. And when I had a company, like family coming over, I would have to ask them, would you please clean up a little bit so I could stand to have my friends over. And so and I've had dogs, I've had cats, I've had every kind of imaginable animal. And the problem is how you take care of it. It's a people problem. If a person has a dog and he doesn't maintain it, they leave their food and their water out for the dog, they're feeding the rats and the raccoons and all of those things. And they're encouraging them. And there seems to be a myth that the moment a chicken arrives, rats and raccoons pop out of the flowers. And that isn't actually true. So chickens are very healthy and quiet, but when people leave food and water out for them, they're leaving food and water out for every other thing, the rats and raccoons and the mice and all that. And they create smell. The dogs, one thing about difference between dogs and chickens, dogs like to be up at night barking, and when one barks, every other dog in the neighborhood barks. And I'm a early to bed and early to rise person. I get up at 2:40 to get ready to go to work. And so I'm going to bed at 6 o'clock, 6:30. And so when dogs are barking, that's a problem. But chickens are a lot more sensible. They go to bed when it gets dark, and they sleep. And other than bragging, a chicken likes to cackle when she's bragging that she just laid an egg. She's very proud of herself. But it's not nearly as obnoxious as a dog can be. When I had the ticket here for having chicken, and I immediately got rid of them, when I had a ticket they said that chickens and rabbits there was no tolerance in South Ogden, no tolerance for chickens and rabbits. And yet dogs and cats are very little supervised or regulated, and like's been mentioned, they are running around and causing problems. Nobody's ever been attacked by a chicken running around, I don't think. Maybe a rooster, but anyway, so to focus on that, if there's any regulation, if you identify, okay, there's smell, there's noise, there's pollution, there's feces, there's danger, there's hygiene problems, all of those can be addressed by addressing the noise. So a chicken is not a noise problem. It sleeps at night. A chicken is not, their droppings are very beneficial. A dog waste cannot be used in your garden as compost. A chicken and a rabbit are some of the best things that you can add to your compost. And some people around this area believe that we may be heading for harder times, and we can see it, I think, with Bidenomics, that things are getting more expensive. We've had pandemics where stores and churches have been shut down, where we can't get to places. And so to have independence, to have the freedom, the self-reliance, and somebody mentioned about cost, whether it's cost effective. It isn't ever about cost effectiveness with chickens and rabbits or whatever, because it's a question of availability. And if someday we cannot, because of a trucker strike, because of the fuel, there's so many problems that can interrupt our supply chain, as we've seen in the past few years, a lot of problems with supply chain. And when you can't get access, when you go to the grocery store because of some pandemic or like the rush on toilet paper that we've had recently, if you go to the store and the shelves are empty, it doesn't matter what it costs. The prices go up and people pay it to get what they need. And with chickens and rabbits, it's such a small, it's easy to maintain them. And there are slobs, there are people who don't, with chickens, like the guy mentioned, if they build an ugly chicken coop, there could be a zoning ordinance about quality of buildings, the sheds, for sightlessness, for the unsightliness of those chicken coops. If you came over to my house right now and looked at I still have my chicken coop, it's insulated, it's painted, it's nice looking, it has proper space for the amount of chickens I would keep to provide eggs, and if a chicken gets sick, I don't spend $100 on a vet. The chicken goes bye-bye. So there's a lot of benefits to chickens, and it's about needing to be doing it. When I first started doing chickens, my mom laughed at me. She says, "You don't have the heart to kill the chicken. You wouldn't be able to cut its head off." And so I had to show her that I could. But it was about preparedness. My idea with chickens is the preparedness for that day when they're not available. You need to know you can. You need to know how to handle them. Somebody mentioned educational benefits. It's so good for psychology and for training of kids and responsibility. The chicken and rabbits, their droppings, like I say, they're good. They're fertilizer. They're good for compost. They don't smell. They're not slippery. They're not unsightly. Nobody would complain about chicken droppings or rabbit droppings in their yard. But dog droppings are very annoying. So it's kind of hard to understand. It seems like a discrimination when you say no tolerance for chickens and rabbits, but allow so much freedom for dogs and cats that provide so much more problem, and are the major cause, in my opinion, of unsightly things like rats, poop, and raccoons and things. It's the food that people are leaving out for them. And as far as the smell of chicken coops, if a chicken coop is well built and properly maintained, there's very little noise. Roosters are an exception. I've seen places that they allow except for roosters. But proper maintenance of a chicken coop is to provide 6 inches of a material like straw or wood chips, and then to refresh that every 6 months, to take that out, and it's great to put into your compost, and then once a year to sanitize the chicken coop. So if there were rules, if the concern is smell and hygiene and that kind of thing, then if they were to keep 6 inches, this could be a code, 6 inches of wood chips or some bedding material that's changed every 6 months, and then once a year sanitize, and then about free roaming. They need so much space. I built my chicken coop so it's elevated, and then between that and another shed, there's like 2-3 feet that they can run in an enclosed cage, and then they can go underneath their chicken coop and then inside their chicken coop. And a chicken, to be healthy, should have 2 square feet of chicken coop space. And so chicken coops could be made that are made properly, that don't smell, that look nice, and codes could be written to that. So nobody, whether it's a chicken or a tool shed, you could have a code against what kind of building materials or how it can look and that. And people can comply with that and still be able to exercise their freedom in having chickens. Let's see. Just checking my notes here. I think that covered everything I needed to say, so thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, Karen Petrovich. I am a resident of South Ogden. I am for chickens. I am against roosters. But more importantly, I'm for my peace of mind. I am for code enforcement and ordinances. The city of South Ogden has very limited space on a lot of its properties, which does not really allow for a lot of chickens in general, let alone abutting other properties. In my neighborhood alone, and I live in a pretty busy neighborhood, I've got boats that are parked there for weeks on end on the street, and they're not supposed to be. That's against the ordinances. I've got cars that caught on fire, and they've been parked there for months previously. They have now been moved. The boat that was parked, they just move it around the corner when they get reported, and nobody else enforces it to try to go ahead and take care of it. There are vehicles that are parked in their yard that's just parked on the grass. That's against code enforcement unless there's a snow situation. The dogs and the cats that are completely running wild, against code enforcement. On top of that, nobody is enforcing any of the codes. Even when calls are made, I've called once previously, and I had to call multiple times just to get a hold of somebody. I want to say probably 3 or 4 times. I believe the code enforcement officer doubles up by doing other things as well. So we,
Ma'am, let me stop you.
yeah,
We're in a public hearing for chickens, so you
Yes.
got to limit your comments to chickens, and we understand the code enforcement aspect of that is a complaint that you
yeah,
have, but
but that is
let's limit it to
directly
chickens.
related to chickens in general. Because with chickens come regulations, come code enforcement. We already don't have enough code enforcement to enforce the current ordinances that we have. How are we going to enforce additional code ordinances in total? I would love to have chickens, but I'm just concerned that because of all these issues that we've been having and that I've been seeing, and I've only lived here for a couple of years, they're not going, people are going to have to consistently be Karens and be calling in. It's going to be more work for everybody all around. I would like if we can get more code enforcement and then have chickens, then that would be a good thing in total for the reasons that other people have noted. And I've actually pulled up the city of Ogden's code enforcement, just going through their regulations. And if we do get chickens, I would like to recommend that we do something similar to what they're doing, where there's a minimum of 2,000 square feet of non-paved, a maximum of 6 chickens per property. They can't be slaughtered on site. They do need a license. There is a fee with that license. Residential chickens are not permitted to roam freely outside of the coop or the run. If they do roam freely, are they going to be considered pets or property? That is important. Overall, the chicken coop itself, I did do some research that the standard breed, 4 square feet per chicken for the standard breed and 8 square feet for the run space. Heavy breeds require more. Because in all reality, like everybody else has already been saying, so I don't want to reiterate it, there's maintenance, cleaning, illness, rodents, bugs, et cetera. I already have raccoons that go through my property. So on a small property, having chickens, I'd probably have a whole platoon of raccoons and other animals, which would be fun to watch, but would definitely not be fun for a living. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Von Bon. I'm a 32-year resident of South Ogden. Air Force brought me here. My wife is a lifelong resident, with the exception of the 5 years I took her away down to Las Vegas or over to Spain. When we first moved here 32 years ago, just down here on Ogden Avenue between 38th and 37th, Grandpa Siret, that's what my kids called him, he had chickens, and he had 1 rooster. And that rooster crowing, dark 100 in the morning, because he was having some fun. We're pro-chicken. We don't want roosters. If we get a rooster, we're going to throw it in a pot. We're going to cook him up. But as far as having chickens, we want to have layers. Price of eggs goes up and down like stock market, just like cartridges for a printer. It gets outrageous sometimes. And we just want to have enough chickens to provide us enough eggs every other day, 3 days a week, whatever, so we can have decent homemade eggs. And 3 to 4 chickens. Plan on having a movable space for them to keep them contained in the yard. And they clean up the pests, we move them over, clean up those pests, put them back in the coop at night. That's all we, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amber Payne. I've been a resident of South Ogden for 19 years. I just want to bring up that this was something that was discussed about 9 years ago and turned down, and I'd hate to see it go another 9 years if this doesn't get approved. We plan to be here in South Ogden. I know an argument was made, I think, on Facebook or somewhere that said, well, if you don't like it, just move. But not all of us can just afford to just up and leave our homes and go to a different place. And love to have some farmland, but not, not all of us can afford it. Anyway, I just want to read this. This is from the website in Salt Lake, our capital city, the most urban city in our state, that allows backyard chickens. They said Salt Lake City has made some changes to city ordinances to relax restrictions and allow residential chicken coops. Residential chickens benefit our community in a variety of ways while providing a sustainable, healthy, and fun source of food. Backyard chickens can improve the health of your yard and your family. The most obvious benefit of keeping chickens is the production of eggs. Eggs from well-maintained backyard chickens are not only cheaper and more environmentally friendly, but they are actually healthier and taste better too. Compared to factory farmed eggs, backyard eggs contain significantly more vitamins A and E, beta-carotene, and omega-3 fatty acids. Chickens provide more than healthy food. They act as a natural pest control by eating insects, and their droppings are rich in nitrogen, making it an excellent addition to your compost bin. And I just want to add on to that really quick. We just, this last year, got some fertilizer chicken poop from our nephew, and our garden has never grown such large produce. So finally, raising chickens at home can help reconnect the divide that has been created between the American diet and food production. Playing a larger role in the production of food on your table will help foster a greater understanding of and appreciation for what you eat. And I would just like to finalize that by saying I would love for my children to also, they're the future, understand the hard work that goes into self-sustaining, working for yourselves, being self-reliant. And I think that this is just something small that they could have that could help them anyway. And I say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Don Schulcox, and I am a resident of South Ogden for the last 6 years. And in reference to the article she just read from, they have conditions for residential chickens, and if you read that over, most of the requirements are fairly reasonable. And I think it would be something that would be relatively easy to enforce. And in the South Ogden newsletter, Councilman Howard brings up the issue of code enforcement, so it is actually a part of the discussion. He complains that they have only a single code enforcement officer and that he's considerably overworked and has other responsibilities like school resource officer. I myself am a retired police officer as well, come from a small community. I grew up around chickens. I don't have a problem with them. I've lived next door to people that have had chickens and ducks, one on each side. They had chickens on one side and ducks on the other, and the problems that I experienced with them were manageable and reasonable. Something that was solved with an easy, simple discussion with my neighbors that resolved the issue. And like the other gentleman said, most of the issues with chickens are not with the chickens themselves, they're with the people that take care of them. As far as the code enforcement issue, that is something that could easily be remedied as it was in the community where I came from. The code enforcement officer, who was me, I found that it was an overwhelming job, and I convinced my administration to help me cross-train the other officers on the department to fulfill that role as well. And it just became another tool in their toolbox. If they saw residents that had, abandoned cars or something like that, or too many dogs, they had the ability to go in and enforce those ordinances as well. And it broadened their use of, like I said, the tools in their toolbox, and gave them more things to help make the community better. Anyway, I think it's something, the enforcement aspect of it would be something that each officer could easily be trained to help enforce and monitor. And the ordinance that Salt Lake City has is, like I said, all the restrictions and requirements are fairly reasonable, and I think it could easily be adapted into an ordinance that would make chickens something that would be feasible in our community. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Gary Godfrey. I've lived in South Ogden for a long time. And I would just like to speak against allowing chickens. I think the claims in their favor, their benefits, have been rather grandiose. They'll help us overcome Biden economics. If we all have a chicken, come on. My main concern is chickens attract pests. We've talked about that. This city is infested with rats. We know it, even though we almost never see one. And it simply concentrates them and will increase their numbers, having chickens and chicken feed. Rats eat chickens. My brother-in-law lives in Uena. He used to have chickens. The rats would get in there, and I'll leave the details off, but they would eat the chickens at night. The economic benefits are marginal at best. And even though I agree that proper care of chickens or of any animal can mitigate all of the problems, we know that the regulation is almost impossible because not everybody will follow the regulations. Parking, snow removal, the list goes on. It's very difficult in a complex urban setting to regulate the details of various aspects of urban life. Most of the other things that I have written down have been covered, and so I appreciate the city council and the city's efforts to hear what the citizens have to say, and my preference is that we not have chickens in South Ogden. It's not the best environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Lena Gears. I have been in South Ogden for almost 7 years now. When I first moved here, I honestly thought chickens were allowed, and the reason why is because my neighbors had them. And it wasn't until I read a newsletter letter from the city that came out saying, just a reminder, chickens are not allowed. I was like, what? I was shocked because I'm like, all these neighbors have them. Then I noticed that my peace was disturbed quite often when I go in my backyard because my boundary of where my backyard ends and where my neighbors can go is very close. And so the noise is like right there. And I'd be sitting, and every time the darn chicken would lay its egg, it was just a screeching sound, and it would just constantly go and go and go. And not only that, the biggest problem I had was raccoons. And I know some of them may say that raccoons, they don't see them. I see them all the time. In fact, Monday night, I was woken up at 2:30 in the morning because I had raccoons on top of my roof. They leave the droppings in the porch area. I've had to trap numerous raccoons. In fact, I was making so many visits down to South Ogden's, the center where you get the cages, the wildlife, $50 deposit each time. I finally got tired of doing that and went and got my own cage. How to dispose of it, they can't tell you. You have to do it humanely. How do you do it humanely when you can't do it this way or that way because the city limits don't allow you to get rid of raccoons? Well, how are you supposed to get rid of them? You can't. We have water, that's what they're attracted to, and they're attracted to the feed. I didn't believe it when my neighbors actually told me there was a rat issue until I walked into my front area of my yard and saw something which I thought was a cat. It was that large. Not only that, but I've seen them numerous times. I'm an early riser, and I see them all the time. I've seen them crawling into my neighbor's chimney with her babies. All the time there's raccoons everywhere. You go over by the hospital, they're there constantly because there's a water form there. They're an issue. And if we allow chickens, and I don't have anything against them, I used to have chickens, but I lived in a rural area. There was room for them. My neighbors couldn't hear them. My neighbors didn't have to smell them. There should be a certain regulation here in the cities, like Ogden, like she was mentioning earlier, how Ogden has it. If they're going to allow it, then it needs to be regulated. There needs to be somebody who is going to govern it, because right now we don't have the manpower. And how do you get that? You have to hire more help. What does that do? That costs taxpayers money. is going to cost us money to enforce it. Right now, you walk around South Ogden, you're going to see tons of chickens. You're going to hear them. Nothing happens to it. I, in fact, called in once. They removed their chickens only to get chickens again in a month when nobody was watching. It's just very frustrating because nothing is enforced in this city. I've noticed that for the 7 years I've been here. My raccoon issue keeps on getting worse. I don't know what to do. I have had to get rid of so many raccoons. It's ridiculous. And I worry about the small animals like dogs that go out at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to the bathroom because I've seen raccoons tear up animals. They are fierce. They catch one, you'll see. But I honestly believe if we're going to have chickens, it needs to be regulated. It needs to be enforced. And I do worry that it's going to get out of hand. And that is my issue.
Thank you. Mr. Gailey, do we have any online comment?
We do. We have one online comment.
Yes, sure.
Josh Payne, South Ogden resident, been here for 19 years, 20 years. I'm for chickens. I was actually here last commission meeting, left this with the commission. This is a list of 13 cities larger than South Ogden, urban cities, here along the Wasatch Front that allow chickens. Chickens are not new to an urban environment. All these complaints about what the pestilence and hellfire and damnation that chickens bring, it doesn't happen. If it did, these cities would not allow them. They would have banned them a long time ago. My wife got up here and talked about Salt Lake, our flagship for the state, the largest urban environment within this state, allowing chickens. I just would like to talk about that real quick. Salt Lake, maximum of 15 chickens, no roosters. 15 chickens in Salt Lake on their small lots. If chickens were that bad, do you think our capital city would allow them? Absolutely not. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the rats. Yes, we have a rat problem in South Ogden. We have rats. We don't have chickens. You know what attracts rats? People. Food, water. People attract raccoons. Our waste, our refuse, is what attracts rats, rodents, raccoons. That's already a problem without chickens. Chickens by themselves do not attract these things. It's the people, like the gentleman said before, leaving out dog food, cat food, garbage, refuse. That's what attracts these pests. It's a misconception that chickens are the cause of these problems. They are not. It's people. People bring the rodents, the raccoons. The other thing that I'd like to point out real quick is the noise complaint issue too. There's actually a study that I have that has been done on noise issues. The city of Pleasanton, California recorded the noises from a squawking hen, which hens do squawk when they lay eggs, at a distance of 2 feet, okay? They obtained this at a distance of 2 feet when a hen was laying an egg. The decibel reading was 63 decibels. Compared to dogs, the noise disturbance when barking exceeds 100 decibels. We're allowed to have, I think, 2 dogs in the city, if I remember the ordinance right. I have a neighbor that has 3 dogs. Again, code enforcement is a whole different other issue. Shouldn't be really considered as far as the chicken thing in my mind, because again, that's a people problem. But dogs are out there barking all hours of the day, all hours of the night. The feces, ridiculous. Again, I talked to my neighbor, expressed my concern. That instead of doing this tattletale government system, they take care of it. That's what we should be doing as a community, is engaging with our neighbors and not requiring this police state. I'm retired military. I've spent a lot of time overseas in combat zones. I know we have a lot of veterans in our city. The thing that's crazy in my mind is that we go over there in the guise of American values, liberty, and the American way of life. And then I come back here to a country, a state, and a city that profess that we're free, and we've got a petition to have some sense of sustainability, self-sufficiency. It's crazy. When we have the majority of the larger cities in this state allowing backyard chickens, why do we as South Ogden City buck the system and not allow it? It blows my mind. sorry for, my wife always talks about that I come off as overbearing. It's really passion-based, and I don't want to come off as I'm angry. It's just passion-based. That's who I am. It's probably my 20-plus years in the military too, honestly. But again, I'd just like to say that I'm for chickens. There's a lot of benefits for chickens. They're a great pest control. They have benefits for the care and well-being of the people that take care of them. One other thing I did want to talk about is the code enforcement thing. There's a lot of cities within the state, I've done substantial research on this. A lot of cities within the state actually don't have their code enforcement officers enforcing the chicken codes and regulations. It's kicked to the animal control. It's a very fitting thing for animal control. If you have a complaint, call animal control, let them handle it. Our animal control doesn't handle raccoons. I've had that same issue in my own yard. I've trapped more raccoons than I can count because we do have a raccoon problem. I actually catch and release. I drive them out to the west rural area out where, west Salt Lake area, and release them and let them find a new home there. As far as the rats, I was putting up an addition back in 2019, and I kid you not, we had a rat trail that was this wide from rats coming through the area in the snow. I don't have chickens, I don't have dogs, but we had rats. It's not a chicken problem, it's a people problem. And thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's take the online comment.
Okay, this comment is from Janice, and I'm sure I will mess up her last name, but it looks like Jorvestead. She says, I have had chickens while living out of Utah. I love the experience. As a mother and a grandmother, I do not understand the emotional logic given by those commenting, but I do not agree with chickens in our city. They do not belong in a city. I agree they have become a nuisance to many, and it has been mentioned many do not follow common ordinances established. Pests, raccoon, rats, they can become a huge problem. I also have a concern regarding 1, property values, and 2, the officer that has the responsibility to enforce ordinances is already stretched thin, as stated in our newsletter. How far can this go? Can we have horses? And yes, I believe that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Briefly?
Like I said earlier, it's not an animal problem, it's a person problem. And somebody mentioned rats getting in a coop and eating the chickens. It's much more likely the chicken's going to eat the rat. And I could offer my chicken coop as a model. I'd have to clean it. You'd have to give me a notice because it's his garden shed right now. But if you use 1/4-inch welded wire for the floor, or 1/2 inch at least for the floor, and up 2 feet, and I won't go into more detail, but you can design it, and mine is, so no baby rat, no baby mouse, no baby snake can get into it. And then food and water, like I said, most people leave it out on their porch and they feed everything. But I can show you, I've got styles designed that makes it, and it's kept inside that welded wire cage. It can't be accessed by the animals, so it doesn't give them feed. And so that could be part of ordinance, the building code for the coop. One thing, like in my case, I had chickens ignorantly here, and the enforcement officer came and said, I said, who told you I had chickens there? Because I said, I didn't even know it was wrong, but when I said, who told you? They said, oh, nobody told me, we just saw it passing by. Well, that's absolutely not correct. They were being nice and didn't want to rat somebody out. But the problem is that when you have zero tolerance for something like that, and somebody who disagrees with the idea can call, it's like saying this guy's mentally crazy, don't let him have a gun, take his gun away, and they have those red flag laws. Well, a neighbor can call and say, this guy's got chickens, and you come and take them away, and then they do something far worse and have all the rats. I don't have rats in my yard. They probably cross through, but they have no reason to come into my yard. But I've seen a neighbor yard with dozens of rats. And in ordinance enforcement, what they've said, that's not a reason pro or con on this argument, because as everybody has stated, it's not being followed for a dog, so that's not a reason to not allow it, to not allow chickens, because it's not going to be enforced. Enforcement's always going to be a concern, but we need to allow freedoms that we can. To not have tolerance for a chicken but have tolerance for a dog is not proper. Somebody mentioned horses, like the other cities that have chickens allowed, or any other animal like horses, they base it on some certain regulation rules. So based on the size of the lot, I don't know, I'm not informed of the details, but there's a point system that cities have. So if your lot is a half acre, you get 10 points, and it takes 5 points to have a horse, or whatever. They have that, so that's how to solve that. So it doesn't get out of hand. It just allowing chickens doesn't mean horses are going to invade the neighborhood. So every problem, there's many health benefits and good reasons, but every problem with them is a person problem and can be solved with ordinances and inspections like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I hate to open an entirely new can of worms, but one thing that we have to consider is not only whether we allow chickens in a residential area, but whether we allow other fowl, ducks, turkeys, whatever. I just want, if anybody here wants to address that, we're fine to hear that, but.
I would also advocate for ducks and geese. They do require water sources, so you probably need one of those in the backyard. But you need it for chickens anyways. Ducks are quieter than chickens. And I don't know, geese are pretty cool. That's all I gotta say.
I just want to follow up with what I said, what my concern was, and that was ordinances that the city already has are not being followed. And everybody mentioned it. It's a people problem. Things aren't being done. So if people cannot follow the ordinances we already have, why add another one to it that they're not going to follow? Granted, there will be people that do, but overall, everybody in this room has mentioned ordinances are not being followed. And so I really hope you guys take that into consideration before, with your choice of words, opening a can of worms by adding another layer of another policy or ordinance not being followed.
Thank you. Okay. At this point, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? When the public hearing is closed, we're done hearing comment on that particular issue. We have one more public hearing on another issue that will not take quite as long. And then we will have discussion and make a recommendation on the chicken issue. But we have to take this other issue first. So I will entertain a motion to open a public hearing to consider comments on the amendments to the general plan having to do with moderate income housing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are in a public hearing on that issue. Mr. Vlasic, are you addressing this? You know what, I'm sorry, I didn't give you the first shot on the chicken issue.
You didn't, but I think we could maybe have that during discussion. So.
Okay.
Yes, so this item we've been discussing for quite a while. It's about a modification to our general plan, the moderate income housing chapter. Just to give you a brief review. We have 5 implementation strategies that are required by state law. We have, when we updated our annual report, we found out that 2 of our strategies did not include a timeline, so that we were found not to be meeting the requirements of what the state requires. So what we have before you tonight are recommendations for changing the specific entries for those 2 items. I think it's implementation measure 1 and 2. It's simply adding dates and seasons when we anticipate completion. They're indicated in blue text in the report. And if there is if this does move forward to the city council with a recommendation and is approved at a later stage, this will hopefully, we're anticipating this will bring us in check with what the state requires.
Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there any online comment? That being the case, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. I guess technically we need to reconvene as the city council, or I mean this planning commission? No? Okay. All right. Item number 3A, consideration or recommendation on whether chickens and/or fowl should be allowed in South Ogden City. So there's really 2 questions that need to be answered. The pivotal question is whether we allow chickens in a residential area. And then secondly, whether we should allow other fowl if we allow chickens. So we can speak to that, to any of your personal feelings. I was going to say something, and now I forgot what it was. In any event, if the recommendation is positive, we should also be addressing what conditions we would set in a potential ordinance. So all we do as a planning commission is make a recommendation to the city council. We cannot adopt an ordinance, only the city council can do that. But they have us review it first and make a recommendation to them. So once we make the recommendation and it goes there, they can agree or disagree with us. They can agree but send it back to the planning commission to have us make adopt a specific statute with whatever we need to put in it. So that's the procedure. But call for discussion on this item. Anyone on the commission?
I guess I can give some comments. I'm generally in favor of them, but with, like it's been mentioned, with restrictions and regarding allowing other fowl, I would just be more inclined to start out small instead of just opening the floodgates. Just some thoughts, and then reading through the packet, just seeing some of what other cities have done. With code, we might be able to even adopt some common sense code that just start out small.
Okay.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Bruder. I think that we should start with chickens only and allow kind of that experiment to run its course and see how that works. I'm not in disagreement that ducks and geese are beautiful and probably in some ways preferable to chickens, but I think that I concur with the idea that roosters are loud and probably we don't need those in the city, but to allow a couple of hens seems to me comparable to allowing 2 dogs at your place with noise and potential smells. And I think the code enforcement issue is a hot button issue, obviously. But we currently have an ordinance that prohibits chickens altogether, so it's already a code enforcement issue. It's not like we're creating a new one necessarily. We're just allowing people that want to have chickens an opportunity to do that in a reasonable way. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I'm also more likely to be in favor of having chickens as well. Obviously, code enforcement is probably a different issue that we want to deal with on a different day. We probably need to make a recommendation to the city council about. But I'm all in favor of being self-reliant. There does need to be some enforcement, though. I've got a couple of questions for some of the other admin leaders here really, in just a minute, but I've done some research as well. I agree with everything that everybody said to some degree. The one, just looking at some of the other codes in other cities, Orem City, I've also looked at West Point City. West Point City, I really like, they've got a multiplier. So if you've got a half acre lot, you multiply that by 10, and I believe this was brought up, you have a certain amount of animal points based on how many acres you have. So if you have a half acre, you multiply that by 10 or by 100, and you have 50 animal points. And each of these animals, so they've listed the animals that you can have in the city: pigs, horses, cattle, sheep, and goats, chickens, ducks, geese, and so on and so forth, right? There's a point system, and you can only have so many of those animals based on this point system. So, they've got chickens listed at 5 points apiece, and so if you do the math, somebody that has, a half acre times that by 100, you can have, 10 chickens? Is that right? So I like the multiplier idea. But I also would like to go back to the 2015 recommendation that our own city council recommended as well, to some of those recommendations. The no barn, coop, pen, or corral could be kept or maintained closer than 75 feet to the street, 25 feet to any lot, or 50 feet to any building. I agree with that. Any person wishing to have chickens shall get a permit. Do we agree with that? I agree. No roosters in any residential neighborhood in the city. No eggs can be sold. I can agree with that. And obviously, they couldn't be slaughtered on site. But my question for the city admin is the animal control and stuff like that. That's probably another issue too. Does our animal control not take care of, if they don't take care of raccoons, why do they not? And why could they not take care of chickens as well?
So wild animals are not controlled by the city. So coyotes, badgers, raccoons, none of those are controlled by the city. So that's why animal control doesn't deal with any of those. That'd be more Department of Wildlife, which I don't think they do either.
Okay. They don't.
Say, for instance, we go forward tonight and send this up to City Council. They'll come back to us and ask us to go more in depth with the ordinance or looking into that, or how does that work exactly?
If they choose to allow chickens, then yes, they'll remand it back down to the Planning Commission and say, create an ordinance that allows chickens but regulates them.
And then, I didn't ask the question in the but Mark, when you was putting this together, and the other cities that have chickens, did you by chance notice if each of those cities had someone to enforce the ordinance?
There was little discussion in ordinances of the enforcement. So it was really more about the conditions for when it's in compliance. And so, and I think as was brought up this evening, that it is sort of a separate issue. It's
Okay.
related, obviously, but it's separate.
Because I think that's my only holdup. I'm not against chickens at all. I'm pretty much the same, but I do feel like if we're going to bring another ordinance, stack another ordinance on the city municipal code, are we just doing that just to say it's there? Or can we actually push and get a code enforcement officer that's enforcing zoning issues like this would be?
I could try to answer that. I think that we deal primarily with land use and zoning issues here, and or enforcement would be really something that the city council would have to decide because it's a monetary fiduciary sort of decision.
Yeah.
I think that we could reach out or try to find out from other communities that have ordinances in place, how they deal with it, and so that we can learn from what other people have done and try to craft an ordinance that requires the least amount of review by other people. So I think that could be something that we could be directed to do and try to find something that's least onerous. I think as far as making decisions about hiring new employees, that goes beyond what we do at Planning Commission.
I hope we kept that note of I can't remember who said it, but that they cross-train some of the police officers with code enforcement. So that might be, I know it's not for us.
There could be some positive ways to do it, very creative ways to do it, and we could certainly do some research on that. Once that we get some direction from, you make a recommendation, city council comes back to us if it goes that far.
Okay.
If I can make a comment,
Sure.
Mr. Chair. So just because the city council makes that decision about whether to hire a code enforcement officer or not, you can still make the recommendation that they do.
So that could be added into what I say here, yes, let's do this chicken thing, but before we do that, we should probably have a code enforcement officer, someone who's prepared to deal with all the ordinance. Because it's clear, I think I heard several people talk about it in here. It's not just chickens that we're going to be enforcing after that. We've got other things. We've got the cars on the side of the streets and in the driveways, trailers. That's all stuff that needs to be dealt with too. So I think that would be my stance.
Okay.
To make a recommendation of the city council that, yes, we're for chickens, but before we do that, can we do the code enforcement approach to that, get that straightened out first?
Yeah, I saw the article as well, and I'm a little shocked that we have just a part-time person doing code enforcement. Maybe we recommend it be a full-time person. If there's just too much on that person's plate, then yeah, we probably got to add.
Well, he's
to it.
he's a school resource officer.
Right.
So in the summer, he'll go he'll enforce nuisance violations, yard stuff. But as far as when school's in, he's getting paid, the city gets paid by the school district, so he can't just go off and take off and deal with zoning issues during the school year especially.
And I don't know that I'm in favor of solving that first. I'd rather just do them at the same time, because there's a lot of people here who want chickens, and it's America. And we're supposed to be the freest country, but a town in Utah is not allowing people to have chickens in their backyard where it's pretty acceptable nationwide.
Okay, I'll go with it at the same time then.
Well, any one of you are entitled to make a motion. You can frame the motion however you want. So, but at this point in time, I will entertain a motion on, if we can address it at the same time, that would be great, whether we should allow chickens in residential areas, and addressing also whether we should allow other fowl.
I'll take a stab at one, and then you can maybe. All right, I move that we recommend to the city council that we, as South Ogden City, allow chickens, with the caveat that we also, at the same time, address some of the code enforcement issues and I guess leave it up to their purview since they control the finances to come up with some of the ideas on how to enforce it, but allowing chickens also needs to come with some code enforcement.
You had spoken about roosters. Did you want to add that in?
Oh, I also want to add that we do not allow roosters or other fowl, that we do allow just chickens only, no roosters, and that at a later date we'll come up with a code.
I'll
So-
second that motion.
Before I call for a vote, I just need point of clarification. I didn't ask for anything with regard to roosters or other conditions, because it was my understanding we're just sending that issue up, getting a vote from the city council, and if they want specific provisions, it'll come back to us, and we put those in, because, I mean, I have a whole list of conditions, but
I think it would be helpful for the council if you said these are the conditions we think would be appropriate. So they could consider that and then make a decision and send that back. That might be helpful for them.
Commissioner Bruder, we would normally just take a vote on your motion. Can we set aside the motion for a second and talk about conditions?
Yes.
Okay. And maybe the easiest way to go about this is to just kind of get a feel based on, I have a list and you may have others. So are you in favor of limiting the number of chickens based on the size of property?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you got to have a multiplier for sure. Yes.
Okay. No roosters?
Yeah.
No roosters, but I think you specifically say no roosters within residential zoned areas. Is that fair to say?
Does that mean you want to allow them in commercial zoned areas?
Can I comment on that? I think the difference in South Ogden, we don't have any agricultural land and zone land, so it really is either residential or commercial and other uses. So we may not have to say that.
Yeah, I don't see that in any other, for instance, the main one I'm looking at is West Point cities, and they don't specifically say commercial areas. They just say no roosters in residential areas.
I think they have agricultural land where they make distinctions between residential and agricultural, so.
Okay, are we limiting chickens that they must be in a coop or in a run? In other words, they're not roaming free in the yard?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to regulate the amount of space per chicken? Like 2 square feet, 4 square feet per chicken? I'm not saying we have to make that decision now, but do you want to limit the space?
To that, I would only say in the rear of the backyard. Is that fair to say? Okay.
And I don't know if it was a limit. I think it was they required a certain amount of space.
But if we're going to require them to be in a coop or in a run, you have to decide how big that's going to be to allow two.
Oh, I see what you're saying, like
Mhm.
limit. But would you get that by limiting the number per acre?
That's how
Then-
I think would be the easier way to do it, and require that they be in the backyard, but not require that a code enforcement officer go out there and measure the size of the run or something. I think that's just
Too
going to be
nitpicky.
onerous for our code enforcement officer, who's already overworked.
Okay. We're in favor of not slaughtering chickens on the property, getting rid of rotten eggs, dead fowl within a time period.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. We're going to require a setback from a neighbor's, from your boundary.
I think so.
Yeah, I think in the 2015 recommendations, they say 75 feet to any street, 25 feet to any lot line, or 50 feet to any building or adjacent lot.
I think
I think-
the 25 feet might be a little onerous, but I think there should be
I
some
agree.
setback for sure.
That would disqualify a lot of people for,
There There are other cities that I'm aware of that actually have, if you don't have 8,000 square feet on your property, you wouldn't even be allowed to have chickens. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's part of, I mean, we do have some small lots here in South Ogden.
Yeah, and I think that's I mean, if I go back to 2015 and I look at this recommendation, I think that'd be it's probably what they're trying to get at, right? That if you got a small lot, it's probably not, I don't know.
So size of lot would be another condition?
I don't know. I don't know
Minimum
that-
size? Or
I don't want
I
to be too
think-
restrictive to people.
I think you just put that into your calculation and have, you know, everybody in the city is allowed to have a dog, whether they live in a townhouse or
Yeah.
something larger. And I think similar type approach with chickens.
Okay. And are we going to require a permit?
I don't think we want a permit. In my experience, I think permits end up being a net loss for cities. That they never charge enough to cover the administrative costs to maintain the permit program. I think we should either decide that they're allowed or not allowed and go from there.
Yeah, I agree. I just wonder if the permit is really just kind of a point of contact for the city to say, look, hey, these are the rules. Now go do what you're going to do, right? So at least we've got full disclosure of what the rules are before they go do it.
Do you view a permit as different than a license? I'm looking at you, Lisa.
We do make a distinction, like we require a rental license and require a building permit, but
You require a license for a dog.
we do. I think a permit kind of says there's more to it than just allowing a dog or a chicken in this case. I think a permit says, oh, there's other things you have to follow, like setbacks or whatever. So I think we'd call it a permit.
And I think the permit would be part of the process of allowing these people to have chickens. So they'd come in, they'd fill out their permit, they'd give it to the code enforcement officer, he'd go and check and say, okay, yeah, these guys have it exactly how it's supposed to be. It's not going to violate anything. It's not going to encroach on this neighbor's property.
I liked the Salt Lake City one. I didn't include it, unfortunately, in the packet because I deleted it by mistake. So I apologize for that. It's been mentioned here several times tonight. It was very thorough. I like the ones that were more thorough and detailed as far as how you're going to control it. So there was that one, and I can't remember the other, but I can take a look at them. But I really like that approach, that especially if you're not going to have a permit, that you're very clear about what is required so that they can follow that and almost turn it into a manual of how do you do this. I think having some public information after you have it, so it's easier for people to understand it. I know that Salt Lake City has prepared something like that. So I think that would be something. And just comment on permit. I think a permit is, you're permitted to do it if you meet these requirements versus a license, which I think it's kind of like zoning in a way.
So part of me is against a permit just because it's government, getting in the way of doing things. But part of me thinks it's a good thing because then it sets the expectation for the neighbors, so it's not a problem. So I don't know where I.
And I think it
Kinda
puts
go
it
back and
cut and
forth.
dry on what's expected, what the city expects, so that we don't have to deal with extreme nuisances. We're going to say, here's what the city's expecting, we'll give you this permit, here's what you can do.
Could I comment back on one more thing on the codes that the
Yes, sure.
commissions, excuse me. I think we should avoid any of the model ordinances that have rural property or rural land, because I think it's a very different situation than what South Ogden has. So a lot of them are dealing with in terms of acres and 1 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres, and we have none of that. Our issues are half acre and smaller, particularly smaller. And I think that it's a whole different set of rules and regulations that need for that sort of situation. They're tucking in for the agricultural land. They can have horses and cows and other things. And so I think we need to be fairly careful not to follow that guidance, because I don't think it's applicable.
So animal points may not be.
They may not be. I haven't seen that. I'd like to take a closer look at it and see if we could do it, or if anybody's doing it in a more urban setting.
Great. So in terms of what we're forwarding here, I guess what we say to the city council is we don't have an agreement on permits, and if they want to permit, we can construct an ordinance that.
Yeah, I guess I'm fine with, if I'm fine with the permit. I'm not, like, I agree with Commissioner Bruder, like, seems like just a hoop to jump through, but if the council doesn't want a permit, that's fine. I think we're better off to forward a recommendation than a permit and get it kicked back to us without one than to not. I mean, we're obviously, some of us are concerned about a permit, so let's send that to the council and let the council make that decision if they think that's important or not.
And my only recommendation, I'm not in favor of the permit, but, I mean, I know there's other concerns in our city, right? So if we're trying to make sure we keep everybody happy, that would be helpful on those individuals that would rather not have chickens in the city, right? At least that'll be a way for us to convey to those that want chickens that, hey, these are the limits.
That's really,
You
really
know what I mean?
compelling, yeah. I agree.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I make another comment?
Please.
Something that hasn't been discussed so far is maybe what the penalties are for violating any portion of the ordinance, and perhaps Commissioner Gresham would like to speak to that. I don't know, because, what happens if they get a complaint called on them or multiple complaints, what it would help to have it written down, what the consequences are going to be.
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
In Roy, that's where I work. I'm a code enforcement officer in Roy. Anything zoning related, a first violation is a $25 fine, and every day after that is a $50 fine. Each day is a violation. So it's kind of tricky when you're dealing with chickens, because if you have someone who's, the chicken coop's super dirty, we're going to go back every day and $25 this day, $50 this day, another $50 the day after that, another $50 after that. And to a point, then all of our zoning issues are Class B misdemeanors, Class C misdemeanors, and can be referred to our justice court.
So with property rights, say I have chickens and I don't want you on my property. I don't have to let you on my property, right?
No.
So how are you going to enforce it?
A lot of that would come from probably standing in the neighbor's yard, smelling what they smell, seeing what they see. It's only a problem until it's not a problem until it becomes a problem for someone else. Typically, I don't go in anybody's yard, the person. I'm in the street looking in backyards and.
Thanks.
Could I make one comment on what I kind of gleaned from reviewing these ordinances with regard to a permit? It seemed that the communities that had permits did that so they could revoke them if they violated conditions. So
that's the
rather than
penalty.
having punitive actions like that, they just took away the right. That would then say that we have to have the right, have an ability to enforce that. but it seemed pretty simple, and that's why I think it was in a lot of the codes.
Thoughts on that? That the penalty just be revoking the permit? Which means then you got to get rid of the chickens? And you-
I'm fine with that because I would imagine the code has other provisions for code violations anyway that then this would just fall under.
Mhm.
So,
Can you revoke someone's dog license? Gotta get rid of Fido? I mean,
I don't know.
But there is an ordinance that says you can only have 2, right? So if they have 3, then that's a violation. You get a ticket. It's a Class C misdemeanor.
I think in theory, cities can revoke licenses for dogs if they've acted aggressively, if they've bit people repeatedly more than once, you know. I have had friends that have got court orders that have allowed the city to destroy animals.
Abatement.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. That was my list of conditions. I don't know if anybody has any else that they want to
So
address.
then what we're saying is if you don't have a permit is when you'll start the fines and fees, is after you have a permit, you don't have a permit anymore.
Yeah, if you don't go, my understanding would be if you didn't go through the trouble to get a permit, or your permit got revoked, then you'd be responsible under the normal code enforcement violation regime.
I never thought of that. Yeah.
I'm thinking, I mean, I'm not a fan of the permit, but I think it's a good compromise to have a permit for the folks that
Yeah.
don't want chickens.
Agreed.
Same.
Okay.
That you didn't make a decision, you have decided.
We just made a
permits.
decision, yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to try it another,
Yeah, first one was good. You got it. I've got confidence in you.
Technically, your motion is still out there, but
I recall my previous motion to make a new one, and I move that South Ogden adopt an ordinance to allow chickens, but that we limit the number of chickens, no roosters. We also come up with a way to enforce the code, and that we have some sort of a permitting process and penalties for noncompliance to the code. That a coop is required, that there's no free roaming, that we somehow regulate the space, that the chickens be required to be in the backyard, there's no on-site slaughtering within the city limits, and that we require a setback from buildings and property lines.
I'll second that motion.
okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll have a roll call vote. Commissioner Gresham,
Aye.
Commissioner Bruderer,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
and I don't have to vote, so. The recommendation passes on to the city council. Thank you. You're welcome to stay if you want. Moving on to consideration of a recommendation on amendments to the general plan having to do with moderate income housing strategies. Any discussion on that? Let me get there.
I think we just go with the recommendation.
We can, yes. We've kind of reviewed this several times, so. Seeing no discussion, I'll entertain a motion
I move
to
that,
approve or disapprove the recommendation.
I move that we approve the recommendation as a recommendation to the city council.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second, or a roll call vote. Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Aye.
Commissioner Bruderer.
Yes.
Commissioner Gresham. Okay. Item number 4, special items, consideration of whether a portion of the nature park should be declared as surplus property for purposes of selling it. Ms. Kapatunov.
So this was initiated by a property owner who owns property adjacent to the nature park and wanted to enlarge their property. So they approached city staff, looking at the process. In order to be able to sell that property has to be declared as surplus. Staff has no recommendation one way or another. This is a policy matter that it needs to be decided by the Planning Commission and the City Council. So this piece of property that they're proposing, well, it has to meet some requirements to go through well, depending on how we declare it surplus is if it's known as a significant parcel or not. And a few years ago, we put into our purchasing policy what our requirements or definition of a significant parcel was. And I went through those in the report, but according to those requirements, this is a significant parcel of land. So in order to declare it surplus, it has to go through a public hearing. So that's kind of what staff is looking for tonight, is that if you agree, that then you'll set a date for the public hearing, and then at the next, if that's for the next meeting, staff will create a report that goes more into detail about the pros and cons of maybe selling off a piece of city property.
So I think that staff has determined that under the third provision, this is a significant piece of property, right?
Correct. That was the one about the general plan.
Right.
I've got a question. When the city sells property like this, do they have to put it up for any kind of auction to make it fair?
Yes, it has to be, it goes up for bid, and so anybody can purchase it, not just the people who actually want it.
Okay.
Is this in an existing subdivision? Is it a lot in a subdivision?
So the person who wants to purchase it does have a lot in a subdivision. In order to sell it off, the property that it's on now would have to be subdivided so that we could sell that parcel. We did require that the parcel be under 10,000 square feet, so it could not be used for another building lot because of the zone that it's in.
Do you know how big the lot that it would be attached to will be?
I do.
I guess what I'm
can tell you-
driving at is, once they purchase it, can they combine it? Even though this one's under 10,000, do they have enough here that they could combine it and then just sell it as a lot?
No, because then their lot wouldn't be big enough.
Okay.
But let me verify that.
And how many chickens would they get?
None right now.
While she's looking at that, if anybody is still listening in online, just have a couple of other items, and then we'll have other business or public comment. So if you have other comment, please type that into your chat, and we'll take a look at it in a minute. Park Vista Drive. It's right by the little roundabout at the nature park.
So I'm sorry, Chairman. What is the potential action items we can take tonight? on this?
I think all that they're looking for is whether to set it for a public hearing. So then we can give notice to everybody and get comment on whether we should allow it.
When we do something like that, is the next meeting typically soon enough or long enough to get everybody's?
Yes.
Yes.
May I ask a question? I live on Park Vista, and I was wondering where is this piece that they're talking about?
So you're entering the park, there's a roundabout. The property immediately adjacent to the roundabout on the right side as you're entering.
If you want to access the packet for tonight's meeting, there's a picture in the packet of where it's at.
I can show you
It's
on
a-
my iPad right after the meeting, but
It's on our
I can't in the
website.
middle.
It's an information packet that's available to anybody.
So I guess I'd move that we set this for a public hearing so that the public can weigh in on it.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I had a quick question. Does the city ever have any plans to use this, or how come the city owns it?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about too.
So, do all of you have the packet available to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go to page.
My internet stopped working for some reason, so.
I mean, I guess to Commissioner, while you're doing that, Lisa, to Commissioner Bruder's point, I would rather not set it for a public hearing. I don't want to sell the property. I'm not interested in the city selling off potential park property. I think in the future, I can foresee this becoming parking or pickleball court or something like that. But if our only action tonight is to set it for a public hearing, then
I
Yes,
agree.
that's the only action
then
tonight.
let's set it for a public hearing and just move the meeting along.
Well, I guess my thought is, do we even have to have a public hearing if we're just not interested in selling it? I guess that's kind of where I was more.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
And that's a, that's a good question, and attorneys should weigh in on that. It's kind of like, if somebody requests it, does it have to go through a process or not? Does the city have to even consider it? And I don't know the answer to that
Okay.
question.
I want to buy this property where City Hall sits, have a public hearing.
So,
But if we don't set this for public hearing and then have public hearing and then make a recommendation to city council won't see this ever again.
No, whatever you, either way, you're going to recommend to them whether they should sell it or not.
Maybe I missed this. What are they buying it for? What do they do?
They, yeah, they just want to enlarge their property.
Anything in particular or just on top of it?
So they wanted to build a detached garage.
It just says to enlarge their current property.
and so it was asked previously how big the existing property is that they own is .41, so 4/10 of an acre.
That's a pretty size
0.41.
lot now.
I just checked it on GeoGizmo.
That's where I was just going, but
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Vlasic, I'm an idiot. .41 acres is how many square feet?
this one says it's
4.3.
point.
Less than 43,560.
4.56, so .41. Let me do some quick math.
I'm showing it, yeah, you're right, 0.41.
It's 17,860.
And in an R110 zone, you need a 10,000 square foot lot?
So it's already about, yeah,
However,
double the
but
minimum size.
because of the placement of the current home, they'd have to tear down the home to be able to subdivide it.
I mean, I think if our only action tonight is to set it for public hearing, I think that's still my motion, but I'm not in favor of that, and particularly not if they'd have enough property to have two lots.
Question, if I might be related to that, if I may. Can conditions be added to the sale to prevent anything such as that?
Well, I think if there's any interest in selling it, yes, but there might not.
Right.
From what I'm hearing, it's kind of like, don't do it. And so it's kind of the whole, I mean, staff can't say, yes, the city's interested, or no, the city's interested. And our code states that if it's a significant, well, if it's surplus real property, that nothing can happen until the planning commission has given a recommendation. So it almost has to go through the process for us to say no, because staff can't say no or yes.
And I think the people who are requesting to buy this are entitled to have some sort of hearing for us
Due
to say whether we
process.
declare it surplus or not, but
But I think Commissioner Bruder's point is well taken, that like, he would like to buy the city hall, so now can he unilaterally force the city through this process over, and then next week, could he say, well, okay, I want to buy the basketball courts, and then I would like to buy the playground. And, the planning commission's constantly having to go through the motion of just being like, set it for a public hearing, denied, set it for,
I just want to give them a false hope. Like, I don't know if we're interested in selling it or not. I think we're trying to get land to for our general plan and for trails and stuff like that. So just selling off any of our property.
And I guess this was a point.
I'm sorry, ma'am, we can't have you, there's a public comment period after this, and you're welcome to comment then, but.
I guess the point's well taken, but the process, I don't know.
I don't have a problem with us doing it. I just,
Yeah.
I don't know if this aligns with our master plan and.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
And
I mean, I think I'd like to preserve as much open space as we've got left.
And that's kind of what the discussion we wanted to hear at the meeting where we have the public hearing. And so,
But Lisa?
which comes first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's,
If we have 3 conditions for meeting significant property designation, and one of those we know it doesn't meet, which is it doesn't align with the general plan, the property boundaries.
It does meet it. It does, I mean,
It
if
does
we
not.
sold
but-
it off, it would not be in line with the general plan, because the
Correct.
general plan, yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so that in itself is saying that it shouldn't move forward. Somebody should be able to make that determination without it having to go to, I would think.
Okay, so what this is in our purchasing policy, and it says that if the city wants to sell or contemplate selling or whatever, it has to determine if it's selling real property, which means land. That
If it's
first, it
surplus.
has to be determined if it's a significant parcel. Because if it is, we deal with declaring it surplus differently than if it isn't. And so we've determined that it is significant parcel, it is a significant parcel. So now we know, okay, we have to have a public hearing before we can declare it surplus to sell it. But then I guess having the public hearing opens it up. Do we want to declare it as surplus or not? And that's the discussion.
I've got a thought that might align with the general plan. What if, and this is probably more for the city council, but if we were to sell, say we were to sell that property, but then use those funds to purchase, for like the city center, if we have the city council put stipulations on that money that it's in a fund to transfer to another piece of property that they then, because maybe that's not where we want land, but we want some land over here. I know it's just a thought.
Exactly, and that's one of the pros of selling the property is that we get money for it. And it has to be fair market value.
I would just hate to see us selling land to pay for chicken enforcement.
But correct me if I'm wrong, this is not an individual parcel right now, right?
Correct.
So they would have to subdivide that.
They would, yes, and we would put all of that cost on them if we decided, if you decided, and the council decided that it is indeed surplus to the city's needs, then they'd say, okay, you have to go through the process of subdividing it, and then it's gonna go on the open market. You may or may not be the top bidder.
Yeah, I would think there's more risk on their part than on ours.
But if you were to subdivide it into a spot where you couldn't then create a lot, are you giving them an unfair advantage? Because no one would really want to buy just a piece of property you can't do anything with. So is that kind of government picking a kind of a de facto?
And you might have a city ordinance that
Not
prohibits you
in-
from creating an unbuildable lot.
Yeah.
There is.
You still have to
Yeah.
maintain frontage and all that kind of stuff on
So
it.
I wonder, could they subdivide it and combine the two lots all at once?
Depends on the size of, have we calculated what the size of the proposed lot is?
Yes,
And
yeah.
is it under 10,000 or over?
Yes,
So it would be not usable for a single-family home lot. So
correct.
your point is valid, I think, that it is favoring somebody who would take it on and add it to their existing lot next door. They
Let
wouldn't
me
have much
state
value to anybody
where I
else.
think we're at. There has been a motion to set it for public hearing, so we can vote on that. If we vote not to set it for public hearing, I guess somebody can make a motion to recommend to the city council that we not declare the property as surplus, and then see where it goes. Except frankly, I don't think we know the answer to the legal question of whether we have to actually do this, so.
So maybe I can read to you. So this is our purchasing policy. It's not codified, but it is written and in a booklet form. And can I read it to you and let you weigh in on what you think
Sure.
should happen? Because I'm not an attorney. I only play one on TV. Okay, sorry. Okay. Waiting for my computer to load, so. Yeah. Okay. Okay, it says, no significant parcel of city-owned real property may be conveyed until after a public hearing has been held before the South Ogden City Planning Commission.
Okay, but we're not conveying it if we,
I think you could make a motion then to, I mean, I'm not giving legal advice here, but I think you could just make a motion to not hold a public hearing and then kill it right here. Which would be my motion. I move that we not hold a public hearing on this.
Second.
Sorry, there was already a motion on the table?
Right.
I'll second that.
So, because there's a motion to set it for a public hearing on the table, and that has been seconded, we have to vote on that. So, all in favor of having a public hearing, say aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay.
Okay,
Second
Sorry.
motion.
can I just ask, I forgot, who seconded your first motion?
It was, yeah,
No, he
it
put
was
it,
your
I
first motion,
seconded
and he
his.
seconded it.
I thought it was Mill's first motion.
No, he motioned it.
Both of the motions were mine.
And I seconded it.
You, Mitchell, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
That's why I write them down.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we have a motion to not set it for public hearing, therefore not declaring it as surplus property. That has also been seconded. Those in favor of that motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. That takes care of that issue.
So shouldn't you still make a recommendation to the city council?
No, because
No.
you can't convey property unless you've had a public hearing. We're never going to have a public hearing.
Okay, all
So-
right,
They can't convey it unless we hold a public hearing,
okay.
right?
Mm-hmm, that's what I think.
All right. I
We might all
told-
get replaced by the
They're-
next meeting.
They're free to fire us if they want.
Okay.
Okay, item number 5, approval of the minutes of our previous meeting from April 11th. Do I have a motion? Or any question or comment as to the minutes? Seeing none? I have a motion?
Yeah, I move that we accept the meeting minutes from last month.
I have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Okay, staff reports.
We have no staff reports. Unless Doug, oh,
Okay. Item number 7, other business. Any other business needs to be brought before the commission?
That may, the rezone.
oh, yes, thank you.
We have a rezone application that's fairly simple, not simple, but we were wondering whether we need to bring it up for discussion first, or if we could call for a public hearing directly and consider the conditions of the rezone at the same time. So in other words, would we have it as a discussion item next month, or could we go straight to a public hearing?
And then have the discussion.
You said it's fairly simple.
It's one lot, and it's, well, I don't want to give, can I give some background, or is it okay?
I have to have background.
Yeah.
before I-
Yeah,
I
it's
feel like
it's
it needs
when we redid the form-based code, it was an area that we redid all of the commercial property to form-based codes. This one we probably thought it was a residential property, and it was actually a business that looked like a residential property. And they've requested that it have the correct zoning designation
Okay.
to call it as a commercial business.
I'm fine with just setting it for public hearing. Anybody disagree?
Second.
We'll go ahead and do that then, thank you.
Item number 8, public comment. Any online comment? What do we got?
We had 2 public comments. I think these might be spilled over from before, but they do say public comment. So Tyler Stringham says, discuss and take suggestions from public on requirements for having chickens. And he also said, are you going to start check all conditions of anyone pets?
Okay. Okay. Ma'am, I cut you off before. Did we resolve your concern?
Yeah, I was just curious of what part, because there's an area on our street also that's empty, and
No.
And state your name, please.
I'm Sandy Moore, and live on Park Vista. And the lot that you're mentioning, I was wondering what part it would be. And so I think you
Are
clarified
you
that.
next to a vacant lot?
No, I'm next to the park. And the vacant lot, I think what you're talking about would be just across the street from me.
Yeah.
And when we first moved there, I thought there were plans for basketball court, all kinds of other stuff, and nothing else has been put in there since we moved in. And so I was thinking, well, wasn't that designated for something already? You know, and I
And
haven't looked back at the,
I can speak to that if you'd like.
Sure.
So you're right. When the master plan for the park was made, there were supposed to be, I think, like tennis courts over on that side. So we're talking about the west part of the park, west of Park Vista Drive, that is just in what our Public Works Department director calls natural grasses. So, however, when the neighborhood was involved in stating what they wanted in the park and how it would be handled, they were very adamant that they did not want anything in that strip because they were afraid that it might spill over into their yards. Or noise, I don't know. The reasons for it, I just know that they were very adamant, and that's why those things were removed from the plan. So, yeah, there's nothing planned park-wise for the future. However, it could definitely be used for parking.
okay, and then as you go into Park Vista, you know, there's this little traffic circle by our house. And then you go down, and then it curves, and then it has a circle. There is an empty space between houses. Is that just considered a way to get to the park and back for the South Ogden people? You know, like for upkeep and that kind of thing? Because sometimes trucks go down there, and then they go down into the trail and all that.
Let me click on it right here and see who owns it. It is actually owned by someone, I guess, who's chosen not to build on it yet.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I was under the impression, because,
Yeah, it's not owned by the city.
oh, okay, so it is just one lot between those two houses and empty?
Lisa, this might be a conversation best had after the meeting.
Right here. Oh, over here, I'm sorry. Yeah, that is,
I was thinking maybe this is South Ogden, but is it
Okay.
I
don't know.
All right. Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion, is there a second? Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.